I hope you're all well and safe and having a lovely day so far with Macmillan. Inspiring stuff, I hope. And I hope this will be too. Um, as I consider in this session, what would best prepare us, what would best prepare the next generation the next generations for a future of connectedness, for a future of global citizenship. I've spent much of my adult life working in education, and I am fascinated by this subject. So come with me, kick your shoes off, uh, warm yourself with a cuppa if you have one. Come with me on a creative blue sky exploration of education. I hope you will fill the chat with your own thoughts and feelings of what I say and the ideas I share. They are my ideas, and because they're mine, they are very British inspired. I've grown up in the United Kingdom, and but I have, as I said, spent the last 20 years traveling the world and working with educational institutions all over the world. But still, I say that everything I'm about to say is, of course, mostly subjective, entirely aspirational, and utterly imaginative. I hope you'll be inspired, and I imagine that some of the things I may say will be provocative, but all thoughts and feelings are welcome. As Sir Ken Robinson said in his wonderful TED talk, "Do schools kill creativity?" And if you haven't seen this talk, I heartily recommend you go and watch it after I finish talking. Don't go now. But as Sir Ken Robinson said, everyone has an interest in education. Everyone has their perspective of how education could be. So before we dive deep into what the future could look like, let's take a quick look at where we were, and then let's take a look at where we are now. But I am going to be spending most of my time with you exploring where it seems we want to be heading. And I say seems because I think that's changed after these pandemic years of isolation. I'm going to be asking a lot of questions. I'm going to be offering very few answers. And I will be sharing perspectives on the same sort of idea. This session will, like the Pleiades, the seven sisters in the sky, this session will point towards a vision of what education might look like, but a vision that will be best viewed on your periphery. So where were we? Well, when education started, formal education started in the industrial period in the late 1800s, it was preparation for factory work. Classrooms to this day still seat like workers in a factory in rows. And students are told when to arrive and when to leave when a bell rings, just like a factory. And the education model has been, for the most part, get everyone up to the same level of proficiency in the same sort of things. That was where we were. Where are we now? Well, we are still shaking off that old Victorian model. Some schools are making steps forward. Some schools are still very much embedded in that model. This is a quote of a parent of a student in Denmark. In the UK, you seem to teach how to pass exams. In Scandinavia, we teach how to think. There are certainly schools that I've heard about and worked with that have changed the curriculum for the most part to one that focuses on play and exploration. It's very different from the school I went to. I've, as Teresa kindly said, I've spent much of my career working with Shakespeare, but I left school hating Shakespeare. And now I spend most of my life opening doors towards the kind of invention and creativity with words and language that made Shakespeare so famous. It was an arts institution that set me onto my path. In school, I wasn't invited to demonstrate a love of Shakespeare artistically through speaking or painting a picture that represents my feelings towards a speech of Macbeth's, or what I feel about the play Othello. I had to express all these ideas through writing with the tools of literary criticism. Now, studying Shakespeare through the lens of literary criticism is like asking someone to analyze and report on a trombone without telling them that this trombone can make jazz. What's the point in studying great works unless we help students find something in it that resonates with them, that plucks a string inside of them, and then help them channel the thrum that they feel and help them reflect it back out to the rest of the world to see if it makes anyone else shimmer? Imagine the end of a Shakespeare class, and instead of 32 essays, there are 3 essays, 5 pictures, 4 physical interpretations, and so on and so on. Sculpture, dance. How can you share with me the love that you have found for a piece of art? I thought things might change when I went to drama school. But in drama school, I found out that my accent wasn't right for Shakespeare, that I had to lose the main part of my vocal identity, the main part of my identity, in order to speak Shakespeare in the correct accent. I didn't fit. I think this is fair, but I certainly feel that I have ended up in my life where I am despite my formal education, rather than because of it. And I still get emails from young drama students saying that they're being told to change their accent. And indeed, my nephew is going through school at the moment in Holland. He's just finishing school. He's an amazing kid. He's grown up trilingual. From an early age, from 1 or 2, he was learning English, Spanish, and Dutch. And in fact, because he was speaking so much Spanish and Dutch, his English fell by the wayside a little bit. And if you know anything about language acquisition, as the brain takes on multiple languages, it does tend to drop back a little bit in other skill sets. He's an amazing footballer, but as I said, he's not so good at English, although he's getting much better now. And he wasn't very good at maths. So despite his trilingualism and great physical prowess, he got held back a year because he wasn't good at maths. He didn't fit. These stories are very different from some schools out there today. You may know that the actor Tilda Swinton co-founded a school in Scotland, and there's no testing there at all. No exams, no hierarchies, no sitting at desks wherever possible. The students learn their science by making a knife or caramelizing onions, by building a boat, which is described as the paragon of interdisciplinary education. You build a boat with others. You've got mathematics, geometry, physics of buoyancy, the chemistry of epoxy resins, of glue, the art and aesthetic of color and shape, the process of collaboration, and the physical outdoor experience of it all. Now, these students' work is documented in books that they write and design to their own best intellectual and artistic standard. And some are saying that these documents can take the place of exam results. But this model sits in an education system that is so heavily predicated on grades. That's a big ask. That said, the Acon School in Gloucestershire in England runs on a similar model, and the school claims that no Acon student applying for university has ever failed to secure a place. There is another way. It is that wonderful thing of being able to celebrate a burgeoning individualism. And that word individualism is going to come back to us later. It's about each chain on each moving bicycle, as Tilda Swinton said, not teaching children as if they're all on the same bike. Is the system currently catered to the variety of brains we have? Asked the actor John Boyega, the actor you might remember from Star Wars, among other films. Hell no, he says. Stop teaching us bullshit. Teach us about tax. Teach us about credit. Teach us about opening a business. Teach us about housing. A lot of people will lose out on opportunities because they don't know. So where do we seem to want to head? What direction do we want our future generations to go? As a self-aware, evolving species spinning for a cosmic heartbeat on our rock around a ball of fire, a planet alone in space for nearly 14 billion years. We've got a decision to make. Where do we go next? How do we want to shape and hopefully survive for the next billion years? The lessons that so many seem to take from the pandemic and its isolating times were that there are other ways of living. There are other ways of working to earn that living. I am certainly experiencing one now, giving a talk via Zoom, something I never would have done 2 years ago. And there are other ways of being in this world for the brief time we have. Now, I'm self-employed, which means very little stability in work or salary, but there are advantages. And it's funny because I often ask myself, if I'm self-employed and I am master of my own life and schedule, much more so than if I was working Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, why do I still work from Monday to Friday, 9 till 5? My friend runs a cafe down in the town I live in North Wales, and their working week is Friday to Tuesday. They take their weekends on Wednesday and Thursday. And I asked her the other day, why do you take your weekend in the middle of the working week? And she said, during her weekends, all the shops are open and all the tourist spots are quiet. There are other ways than the ways we're all used to. And this weekly rhythm makes sense to her and her business, but there was nowhere to learn how to make this path for herself, how to find these different ways of life, how to find these different rhythms of life. I have a map behind me of Everest, and it reminds me that there are different paths up this mountain to an extraordinary view of your own. So what about preparing the next generation for having an emotional life? What about preparing them for living a solitary life? What about preparing them for what family life will ask of them? What about teaching them empathy and listening and compassion and self-sufficiency? Now, I'm sure there are many of you out there thinking, well, that's what family is for. And I do agree to an extent, but it is a fine and a dividing line. What is the responsibility of family? And what is the responsibility of education, of schools, of us teachers? We do need to break the chain of the idea that schools take care of reading, writing, arithmetic, science, humanities, and family must take care of everything else. Families have led each other blindly for years, getting loads right, getting lots and lots of things right, and getting lots of things wrong all the time. Why should families be professionally skilled in therapeutic skills, in teaching the things that I've talked about, like compassion and empathy and listening, when they were taught by their family who didn't know these things, and they were taught by their family who didn't know these things? I want to say as well, of course, the solution, if there is a solution, is not to rest on the shoulders of teachers. I've worked with teachers all my life. My father's a teacher, I'm a teacher. And what is life if but an arena for us all to teach, all to learn, at work, and at home. So what might be the solution? Education is the silver bullet. Education is everything. We don't need little changes. We need gigantic, monumental changes. Schools should be palaces. The competition for the best teacher should be fierce. Teachers should be making six-figure salaries. Schools should be incredibly expensive for government and absolutely free of charge for its citizens, just like national defense. That is a quote from the TV show The West Wing, written by Aaron Sorkin. What a beautiful idea. Schools as palaces, and entirely free for everybody. So, in this ideal world, what could we cover to help people walk this world for the time they're here and be at their best individuality? I was schooled with tools of science and critical studies, and I left education not in the slightest bit ready for a global world. I've carried injuries through my life that I've struggled to heal from, physical injuries, as well as mental injuries, griefs that I've held on too long for because I didn't know how to put them down. I never learned how to help my body recover from physical injury. I had to teach myself how to express myself, how to express and pay someone to teach me how to express how I feel, how to put heart into word or thought into word. And I've had little help from education in it working out how to shed frustrations or unpick confusion. Why don't we teach our students how to deal with anxiety? Just to prep them for the anxiety that they find themselves going through, because we give them the hardest exams at the most complicated and hormonal time of their lives to date, rarely offering at the same time professional support to guide them through that experience or teach them the tools necessary to work through those experiences themselves. Why don't we teach them of mortality, of rejection, of what it is to be rejected as they go for a mainstream job or a non-mainstream job? Rejection is 99% of the creative arts, that's for sure. Why don't we teach conflict resolution? I was reading an article in the paper the other day, who worked with adults, you and I, folk our age and our generations. How many people out there took a course to learn what to do when someone you work with is being a pain? Few of us know how to resolve everyday conflict at work, let alone everyday conflict on the streets. What about a holistic approach to the body and to the world we live in? How to feed the body and the world, how to heal it, how to strengthen it. Most of us intuit a relationship between breath and feeling. Think for a moment about the rapid shallows of anxiety, the panting of lust, the deep draw of the contented. When our emotional state changes, our breath changes. We change our breath, we change our feelings. What about stretching or yoga? A sense of how the body works for a long, healthy life, supporting your body's strength and recovering from the injuries we pick up. Learning about the myofascial network within us and the mycelial network in forests without us, that everything without and within is linked. Your shoulder's hurting. What about your back or your leg? Your foot is hurting. What about your arm? Everything linked through the myofascial network within. What about mindfulness? What about compassion and emotional availability? What about the skills of relating to others? What do we do more than anything in our adult lives? I certainly need to practice the skills of relating to others much more than I've had to practice some of the mathematics I was taught. What about relationships? Not those school sex education classes where, at least in my day, when it came to talking about sex education for the non-male identifying students, We were asked to leave the room. What about lessons in education in intimacy, in permission and consent, in navigating monogamy, exploring polyamory? What about how to cook a meal? What about how to make a cake? How to make soup? How to do your taxes when you're self-employed? Which I found out to my horror I had to do at the end of drama school when I was 21. What about how to buy a house? How to get a mortgage? How to save so you'll be able to get a mortgage? I'm 44. I still don't know how banks work and the stock markets work or how to invest. How to have a healthy relationship to this online world, which so many of our young students, especially from the last couple of years, have been forced to participate in. And to screens themselves. Screens used to be tools, now they're toys. We use them to work in the day, we use them to play in the evening. But how to play, how to love, how to live, how to express yourself, how to care for yourself. There is no perfect way to all of this, but deciding that the best approach is to scoop up most children, teaching and endlessly testing them in the 3 R's. I mean, this is an exclusionary and a reductive practice. It isn't accessible for all neurotypes, and its sharp aim arrows a beeline at producing folk best skilled to grow the economy, a worthy thing in a capitalist world built on exponential growth, but not the only way. As Jason Hickel, the author of Less is More, How Degrowth Will Save the World, suggests, exponential growth is going to kill us one day. And we need creative thinking to imagine a different sort of a global future. There are a lot of voices at the moment saying you shouldn't teach kids to write creatively, said the writer, Kate Clanchy, or to do almost anything creative. You're wasting their time. You should be reaching towards exams. But I think, she carries on, that when you were at school, you should be able to paint a picture, write a poem, do a bit of dancing. And the prevailing approach to teaching English, which favors criticism and analysis over writing and reading, has had so many toxic effects in schools, one of which is to cut down the percentage of pupils continuing with English after the age of 16 to less than 15%. That, she says, is a tragedy. Sir Ken Robinson, in the same talk, To Schools Kill Creativity, said, education is meant to take us into this future that we cannot grasp. Creativity is as important in education as literacy. Consider for a moment the social cohesion that can be formed in the creation of something. The age-old truism that art transcends boundaries and heals divisions. That learning blossoms not only from the witnessing of art, but from the creation of it. With testing and exams, we punish when someone is wrong. Creativity comes from the freedom to fail, says Peter Gabriel, the singer. And the freedom to fail comes from, experimentation. And that's what gives something its individuality. Rudolf Steiner, the founder of the Steiner Schools movement, wrote, "To be free is to be capable of thinking one's own thoughts, not the thoughts merely of the body or of society, but thoughts generated by one's deepest, most original, most essential and spiritual self, one's individuality." We encourage our younglings to always talk out their problems with us, but we don't teach them how. Don't say it this way. Don't use that word. Where is the arena in modern education for do, discover, find out, play? What about how to relate, how to play, how to imagine, and how to make those skill sets applicable in life and ideally generate income? Modern education helps us teach younglings to articulate their thoughts, but rarely their hearts. We need to be able to have room for patience, especially in the teaching of hard lessons. I found the most powerful source of creativity, empathy, confidence in oracy are the arts. Ruth Brock, the CEO of Shakespeare Schools Foundation, which encourages students all across the country in their teens to perform Shakespeare. She says, the act of putting on a play, the coming together, the creativity, the imagination, the failures, the conquering of fears, and the doing it anyway. We must remember that the most powerful characteristic, empathy, is a largely learned trait. In 2018, the adventurer Bear Grylls wrote, support for increased taxes to spend more on health, education, and social benefits is at its highest. In a world that sometimes feels fractured and insular, empathy and kindness are more important than ever. When society is polarized, we need to work twice as hard to understand each other and find ways of working together. I believe young people have a right to develop key skills such as empathy and kindness. I love that. After the last couple of years, and he wrote this 4 years ago, in a world that sometimes feels fractured and insular, empathy and kindness are more important than ever. But what this form of story sharing and empathy and listening does, said Barack Obama a couple of years ago, is it creates the conditions around which we can then have a meaningful conversation and sort through our differences and our challenges and arrive at better decisions because we've been able to hear everybody. Words, spoken or written, are what connects us to the world, said Matt Haig, the author of Reasons to Stay Alive. And so speaking about depression to people and writing about this stuff, it helps connect us to each other and to our true selves. Once, we were a storytelling people, spending time in groups, communicating around the glow of fires. Goes without saying, we now communicate individually around the glow of a screen. 4 centuries or a dozen generations back, when most people could not read, the written word was something to be feared. It was squatting on the doorstep of magic. To be able to read when 80% were illiterate, to cast word into image in the mind. The poet and preacher John Donne's power to speak for 2 hours off the top of his head, employing great design, art, illusion, and allegory, he must have seemed demi-divine. The words Shakespeare weaved must have sparkled in the air. Standing in front of people and speaking is a terrifying idea for most, as anything should be without practice or craft. Today, we are far more together, less present, less isolated, we're more plugged in, we're connected and verbose, but we're dumb. Spending a great quantity of time looking down rather than looking up, having evidently decided that to be constantly in written touch all the time is the way to live. We consume media. Our social circles have become potentially infinite, and we can end them without a word. Just with a click of a button, I unfriend you. So far on the internet, our vocal presence is barely represented. I don't meet you with your voice when I see your Facebook page or your Twitter page. We're losing the power and art of persuasion and the clarity and economy of expressing yourself through simple, direct, and articulate vocal means. We study or observe written craft every day in various forms and degrees of quality, but where can we study brilliant or even terrible oracy? Teaching the craft and practice of the spoken word and the creativity that can come from the written word is absolutely the way forward. It's a challenge to master oracy, to do what Barack Obama did to a crowd in November 2008, or what Martin Luther King did in '63. The power of speech, of eloquence, of verbal persuasion. The pen may be mightier than the sword, but the word spoken is sharper than both. An age of gifted orators would make for a demanding next generation. One Twitter I follow, Chaucer doth tweet, says, "Want to teach innovation, collaboration, problem solving, empathy, and truly creative thinking? Teach poetry, teach lots of poetry." Poetry, when spoken, fuses the arts of all parts of delivery and performance and heart, and can make words an awesome power to wield. Poetry is at the heart of us all. As I say, I keep this map of Everest near to me to remind me that there are different paths up this mountain to this extraordinary view of life. The world has changed so much in the last couple of years, and hugely in the last 20. We're educating children now who'll be retiring in the 2060s, even though we can't imagine the future of the world in 5 years. We won't be able to come up with one path for all in this global world. So perhaps the best advice we teachers can give these young minds and hearts that look to us, often without choice, for guidance in their life, is from the poet and educator Benjamin Zephaniah. Try to write about things close to you. Go out and perform, take it direct to the people. Let the publishers catch up with you later. Read or listen to as much poetry as you can. Don't write just for money. Don't think you're good because you've won an award. Don't go to Downing Street or Buckingham Palace if you're invited. Just stay true to you. The question we need to be asking for this global future is, how do we best help the next generations find out how to be true to themselves? Thank you.
Now, that was absolutely, totally inspiring. And everybody's been expressing that, Ben, how inspiring it's been. Elena and many others have said, how can we get a recording so that we can listen to this once a week? And absolutely, you've reminded us, Ben, about why we probably became teachers in the first place. And yeah, obviously a sensitive point. And in the question box, I've had a couple of questions to do with, yeah, but how do we change this? Maria Eugenia says, yeah, but, you know, education and politics, you know, they're correlated, you know, it depends on that. Yashar says, but what about our curricula? You know, what about our schedules? We're not free to do this. And Diego says, how do we convince parents that, you know, the real point of education? So kind of bringing those together.
I completely agree with all of those points, and heaven knows, or goodness knows, if the way forward to a place that will better prepare us for this global world was simple. Well, if it were easy, everyone would be doing it. And the way is absolutely hard. But the good news is we've made huge progressions in education in the last 20, 30 years. And modern formalized education is still in its infancy, certainly cosmically speaking. My goodness, we're what, 120, 130, 150 years into it. Things are changing, but they will only change in the direction that we want them to change if we shine a light on where the direction that we don't want to go in, and shine a light into the direction we do want to go in. Think about how many modern inventions came from Star Trek. We're still light years away from being in space, but imagination and creativity painted a way forward for some things, and those things do manifest. If we have the courage to believe in it, to believe in what we want, we will find ways together around these obstacles, around these problems, and goodness knows, I think we need to.
Absolutely. And as the quotation says, the longest journey starts with a single step. So if we start one step at a time and want it, as you said, Ben, really want it, then I'm sure even with tiny baby steps, we can make a small difference. And
I
if
love
many
that,
of us
Teresa.
work on it, yeah.
I do. My mother always says to me, you know, when I'm feeling overwhelmed by all the things I need to do to keep going. Well, I've got a tattoo on my arm from Shakespeare, which is written in my parents' and my grand's handwriting, which says "Nothing will come of nothing." So that keeps me going. But also, she always says, you know, think about the footfall in front of you, not the mountain ahead of you. And there's a wonderful spoken word poet called Lionheart who says, just because the step is incremental doesn't mean it isn't incredible.
Yeah, wonderful.
So I agree. I completely
A
agree.
wonderful, wonderful question to finish off on. And I'm sure we're all going to keep on thinking about that and listening to the recording for a very long time to come. Thank you so much, Ben.